There are many attackers in Rainbow Six Siege, some of them balanced and some of them unbalanced. So in today's video, I'll be going over one change I'd make to every Siege operator. The first operator I'd make a change for is Striker. Striker's whole thing is being versatile, as you need a versatile attacker so that the attacker who's playing it can actually get better at the game because they're new. So making Striker have a more diverse loadout would be great. I understand that Striker already comes with every single other secondary gadget, so what do I mean by diverse? I mean in terms of their weapons. It's cool having an LMG shotgun combo, an AR shotgun combo, an AR pistol combo, whatever it may be, but we don't have a primary shotgun combo that we can use, and we don't have a secondary SMG combo like we do on Thunderbird. So making it to where the attacker could also run any type of weapon that they'd want to, as well as any type of secondary gadget, would make Striker feel a lot more diverse, and it would help new players a lot more. Speaking of newer player-friendly operators, let's go over the next operator, which is Sledge. Now, the one thing that sucks about Sledge is that you're a 3 armor, especially when you're lugging around a big hammer like that. You're going to get nitroed when you make vert because you're too slow to run away from it. So obviously the one change I'd make to Sledge is making him not only a 2-speed, but I think actually making him a 3-speed. That might sound overpowered. Keep in mind, Sledge doesn't have the SMG-11 anymore. Sledge doesn't have cookable frag grenades anymore. There's also no other 3-speed vert attacker, meaning that he'd actually have something that he brings unique to the table compared to everybody else, which is his main problem right now. There's nothing that Sledge can do that other operators can't, which just outshines Sledge in most other ways. But if he's a 3-speed, he'd be able to bring something unique to the table that nobody else brought, which would make him slightly viable again. Another change that would benefit an operator is this next buff idea that I have for Thatcher. I think Thatcher's in a pretty healthy state right now, so honestly I wouldn't really want to make any change, but if I had to think of one, I think making the detonation time quicker for his EMP grenades when you throw them would be super useful, because then the people tricking the wall would have less time to react to the EMP, making tricking pretty hard for people who are new to it, but still pretty much the same difficulty if you're a master at it. Moving on from the SAS operators though, let's talk about Ash. Ash is kind of in the same boat as Thatcher in my opinion, where I don't really think they really need any changes, whether it be a nerf or a buff, but I do think if I had to make one change to Ash is that I'd give her a 3rd breaching round. Not only would this make it to where if you were solo queuing you'd be able to burn mirrors easier, but also the only reason that they took away her 3rd round in the first place was because she also had the combination of flash grenades, which meant she could burn any ADS and have 3 different soft breaches. But now that she doesn't have flashes, you won't have that inherent problem, so I still think Ash would be pretty good with 3 breaching rounds, maybe a little OP, but I don't really think it matters that much. But let's stop talking about fraggers and talk about somebody on the support role, which is Thermite. If I had to make one change to Thermite, I'd make it to where his exothermic charges detonated the second that you place them down. Every single Thermite player who has ever deployed his gadget knows that the second that you place these things down, you need to activate them as soon as possible. You never really wait to detonate Thermite charges, especially if there's a bandit trick or a Cade trick. So making them start to explode the second that he pulls that pin and backs away would actually save time and make it a little bit harder to trick, which is Thermite's one weakness right now. Another operator that's pretty weak right now is Twitch, at least weaker than she used to be, and I think the reason for that is her nerfs to the F2. So if I had to make any change to Twitch at all, I would just give back her vertical grip on her F2. Even with the vertical grip for most players, it was semi-hard to control anyways, and I don't think it was too overpowered, so giving it its vertical grip wouldn't make her too overpowered, as she is already pretty good with her ability to destroy zombies with her DMR and get utility with her Twitch drones. So just giving back that vertical grip for comfortability would be amazing. Another change that would be great for comfortability is the change that I'm going to make to Monty. One issue that I have when playing Monty even after the shield rework nerf is that sometimes I feel like explosives do way more damage than they should be if I'm fully extended facing them. For example, if a nitro cell is thrown at my feet and I'm fully extended 5 feet away from it, it's still going to take over half my health. I don't think this should be the case. Sometimes it makes it to where you take no damage, sometimes it takes away all of your health even though it shouldn't. I think if they're going to make one change to Monty, all they'd have to do is make the damage against him more consistent. The next operator is Glaz. The one thing that I just do not like about Glaz is the gun that Glaz brings. It has 71 damage and 16 bullets, which is nice, but because of its considerable recoil and its highly magnified scope, actually being able to hit shots with this thing is pretty hard unless you're running the muzzle brake. Even then, sometimes the recoil can be a bit much, and the fire rate can seem pretty slow compared to other DMRs where the bullet spacing isn't as much. Unless that's just a placebo effect, let me know, but I wish that he had a higher damage weapon that maybe was a bit more fast of a fire rate than this one is now. Let's move to the other Russian on this list, which is Fuse. I think if I had to change one thing about Fuse is I'd change the fact that you can only deploy one Fuse charge at a time. I think it'd be cool to give Fuse two different parts to his ability. One part of the ability to deploy the cluster charges and the other part of the ability to activate however many cluster charges you want to go off at one time. And higher elo on PC, Fuse is pretty useless because all you have to do to counter Fuse is shoot the cluster charge in the roof, and on PC where people can actually aim quickly to do this, Fuse is pretty weak. So I think having the ability to have multiple go off at once would make it a lot better for Fuse, especially in the higher lobbies where people don't actually go against him as much because he is so bad. Another operator that is pretty bad after the rework is Blitz. So what is one change to Blitz without reworking shields, of course, that I think would make him better? Well, I think an issue he's had even before the shield rework nerf or before the shield rework in general is that his flashes from his shield are not long range enough. Most people highly overestimate the range of his flashes, when in reality you have to be under 4 meters of radius to be able to get blinded by this thing even for a second. So I think extending this to maybe 6 or 8 meters would make it a lot easier for Blitz to be played, especially after the shield nerf, and I love to see this happen to Blitz. Another operator that can kind of feel weak at times is IQ, as you really only play her situationally, but even then I still think she deserves a buff. And it's a slight quality of life buff that makes you able to see through your IQ scanner, not just on your secondary pistol, but also on your primary weapon. This is a change that most YouTubers have been asking for the longest amount of time, and I think it makes nothing but sense. You should be able to do this on your primary gun just like your secondary. It would make her a lot more streamlined as an operator, and people would just play her more. Somebody that people play a lot already though is the next operator, Buck. It's pretty hard making a change for Buck as he already is kind of a perfect operator, but if I was going to do one thing, I'd give him a slight quality of life change. And that whenever you want to switch guns from your primary to your secondary, whether it be your shotgun or your AR, I think instead of having to switch hands to be able to shoot the gun, you should have one of each hand on each trigger so that you can just shoot your guns whenever you want to, and there's no animation to switch them. Sometimes if I'm out of primary ammo and I need to shotgun somebody, the extra second it takes to switch to the shotgun mode can get me killed because they don't have the amount of time it takes to be able to switch. However, if it was just a difference of clicking that or clicking an ability button to be able to shoot immediately, there would be no downtime, allowing Buck to be played a lot more seamlessly. Somebody else who's played pretty seamlessly nowadays is the next operator, which is Blackbeard. Now after the rework, what is one change that I would make to this broken mess of an operator? Well, I think they should make the ADS on his shield non-cancelable. A while ago, they made reloading non-cancelable, so if you tried to cancel mid-reload, you would only be stuck with one bullet in your weapon until you finish the reload animation, effectively making it to where you couldn't reload cancel by baiting enemies into thinking you're reloading and then just shooting them with the rest of your magazine. Blackbeard right now suffers this exact same problem because people are just slightly aiming in with their gun, which forces you to look at the Blackbeard and shoot him because you think he's going to fully ADS, and that takes away your attention from the guy behind him who's actually going to shoot you. I think if Blackbeard had to fully ADS every time he hit the ADS button, you couldn't ADS cancel, making it to where when a defender heard him ADSing with a sound cue, they would know reliably they'd be able to take that one-on-one fight. Speaking of reliability, let's go over Capitao. The one thing that does suck about Capitao is you have to pretty much use all of his utility at once to be able to execute, or you're not going to use it at all. He's very situationally dependent because of that, but I think he doesn't really have to be that way. You see, the issue with why people have to use all of his utility at once is for the simple issue that it doesn't last long enough. His smoke bolts actually last for a shorter amount of time than normal smoke grenades. His fire is also very quick, which makes it to where once you use it, you only have a few seconds window to be able to actually use anything that you got off of it. So I think if they made Capitao's abilities last a bit longer, it would make Capitao a much better operator. An operator much better than Capitao, though, is Hibana. If I were to make one change to Hibana that was quality of life personally, I think it would be to make it to where instead of shooting 2 pellets as her lowest pellet count, she should be able to shoot 1. It should only take 1 pellet to destroy a soft hatch, meaning that she doesn't have to waste an extra one to be able to not use that somewhere else. Also, if somebody is impact tricking a hatch or cade tricking a hatch, only shooting 1 pellet at a time to bait the cade trick, destroy the electro claw, or bait the impact grenades would save Hibana a lot of pellets in the long run, actually around double as much, to be able to open other things around the way. So I think allowing Hibana to shoot 1 pellet as her lowest and not 2 would make her a lot easier to play, and you'd be able to save a lot more pellets in the long run. Another operator that I would buff is actually Jackal. The one thing that I would buff about Jackal is that I would give him longer range to be able to scan people's feet. One thing that does suck about Jackal is a lot of the times the range is too short and you're just barely out of range to be able to scan somebody, but if you were to get closer, you'd be putting yourself in danger, meaning you can't pick up on a lot of the information that you would normally want to have picked up on. So just increasing his range by about a feet or 2, I think would make Jackal a little bit easier to play for most people. Next up, I'm going to go over Ying, and I'm actually going to go over a slight rework to her gadget. The one thing about Ying Candelas is they each have a timer for how long the grenade is going to roll before it explodes into flash grenades. But that timer only starts not once it's hit a wall or a ceiling or even once it's left your hand, but it actually only starts once it hits the ground. Meaning that if you fully charge a Ying Candela, meaning that you want to explode it as fast as possible and you throw it in and it hits a ceiling, then a wall, then the floor, it's going to take a lot more time for that Candela to explode had you not just thrown it on the floor, because they only activate on floors. Meaning that when you're throwing in a fully charged Ying Candela expecting it to explode immediately and it takes about 5 seconds, that might get you killed, and I know it's gotten me killed. So making it to where the timer starts from the time you've thrown it, or the time that it hits any surface instead of just the floor, would make Ying a little bit more consistent. Another change that we can make to an operator to make them more consistent is the next change that I have for Zofia. I think for Zofia, they need to make her stun grenades do more. It is cool having the stun grenades go off sooner if people are within the range, whereas it go off later if people aren't within the range, so having that sort of aspect where you can get information is pretty cool. But to be honest, with screen shake intensity being able to be turned off, and most people not even getting disoriented by stuns in the game anyways, I think buffing Zofia stuns to make them actually do more on your screen would make her a lot better in my opinion. Next up is Dokkaebi, and as many of you know, Dokkaebi is already one of the strongest attackers in the game, so instead of going over a buff for her, I'm actually going to go over a nerf. One thing that sucks about going against a Dokkaebi is that if you are dead and you get on cams, if a Dokkaebi calls your team, you get kicked off of the cameras as a dead person, meaning that because she's calling your phone on your dead body, somehow your spirit can't watch the cameras. It doesn't make any sense. Because you're dead, you don't have a phone, so you shouldn't be getting called, so you should be able to stay on cameras. It also sucks because if your teammates are getting called, they can't get on cameras, you can't get on cameras, nobody gets any information, but she gets a bunch of information, which is a very unfair trade-off, and a lot of the times my teammates will get killed because they're expecting me to be on the camera I told them I was on, but because a logic bomb went off, I can't be on that camera anymore, even though I'm dead. That's stupid. So I think taking that out of the game for Dokkaebi would be more than fair. Speaking of information operators, next let's go over Lion. Lion does feel a bit weak, especially now compared to other times in Lion's past history, so I think honestly if they gave him a 4th scan, it would not hurt the game too much. It wouldn't make him all that overpowered, but it would make him feel a lot better to play, especially because you'd be able to waste one at the beginning of the round in case you had something like a Deimos. Next up, let's go over Finka. Just like Lion, I think Finka is a bit weak compared to her past self, so I think allowing her ability to just do more healing overall would be cool. There's a lot of times that my teammates will get 1 HP from a spawn peak off rip, and then they have to play like a 1 HP player the rest of the entire game, and that absolutely sucks for them. So being somebody that's more than just a booster and somebody that's actually a healer would be great because we don't have any other person on attack that can actually do that job. Next up is Maverick. Now I think Maverick's change overall shouldn't be necessarily a buff or a nerf, but a quality of life change, as he is a pretty balanced operator. The quality of life change I would like him to have is making it to where it would take less fuel to open hatches. If you want to open a single hatch as Maverick, it takes a lot of fuel, which means that you can't necessarily get a wall open or another hatch open in the round unless you're very good at playing Maverick and you're very good at fuel efficiency. So I think making it to where it takes less fuel to open up hatches makes him more versatile and less frustrating to play for the average Maverick player. Next up is Nomad. A big issue I see with Nomad and higher elo is that people simply do not play her because if you're a good defender, you can just shoot the air jab before the air jab has its ability to see you. That is right. If you're a defender, you can see an air jab before it goes off and before it hits you if you simply just don't expose your entire body to it and only expose the correct amount that allows you to shoot it before it can actually sense you. This makes Nomad pretty much useless for flanks, so I think if they made air jabs to where the second that even a sliver of your body was exposed to it on a flank, you got air jabbed, it would make her feel a lot better to play, because then people couldn't just shoot your air jabs when they get good enough to realize that they're able to. Speaking of flank watch operators, let's go over gridlock. I think one change they should make to gridlock is the fundamental characteristic of how her tracks are deployed. If you don't know, her tracks deploy in one big circle. If anything interrupts the circle, the tracks simply won't deploy through that surface and they'll just deploy around it. Meaning that if you try to throw tracks in the corner of staircases, it won't deploy half of the tracks that it normally would, instead only deploying the segment that's available on the floor that you placed it on. Instead of just completely getting rid of all the tracks that it would place because of the shape that it's on, I think it should deploy the same amount of tracks every time, and if it's in a really short confined space, it should stack tracks on top of itself to make it even more deadly to push there and make it to where tracks deployments weren't as inconsistent. It would make her 30 times easy to play, as you wouldn't have to think about exact gridlock placements because you know of the circle way that it's deployed now, and it would make her even more deadly. An operator that really needs to feel more deadly right now is Knock. One thing that does suck about Nook is if you try to shoot anything with your ability on, it actually distorts your ability, allowing people to see you on cameras. But if the whole point is stealth and you need to destroy some gadgets along the way, this shouldn't be something you have to worry about, especially if you have a suppressed weapon. Which is why I think they should make the change to Nook that if you shoot anything with a suppressor on your gun, you actually don't appear on cameras, whereas if you had anything else on your gun, you would. It encourages you to play suppressor on Nook more than any other operator, and with her ability in mind and with her playstyle in mind, I think that just makes more sense anyways, and is better for her as an operator. Another operator with a strong identity to how they're played is Amaru. Amaru players go through a window that is on site, and they pray that they're able to not die within the first 5 seconds. That is the life of an Amaru main. So making this a bit easier for Amaru main so it's not just a 50-50 shot would make her a little bit better. And I think one way they could do this is make it to where the glass doesn't get broken on the windows when you Gara hook onto them. If you don't know right now, whenever you shoot your Gara hook out, it will break the glass on the window the second the hook makes contact to the window, and then it will start your animation of going up the window. This gives defenders a huge heads up that you're coming, but it would be cool to have the glass only break when she actually goes through the window physically. That way, if their listening ears are on, they can still hear her repel, but it's not as loud, and the glass doesn't make her pretty much useless if anybody is over the elo of silver. Another operator that is pretty useless the higher you go is Callie, and to make her less useless, I think they need to make it to where her ability doesn't destroy your teammates' gadgets. If you don't know, right now, if a thermite breach is on the wall when it's going off, or even before it's gone off, when it's on the wall, if Callie shoots a lance at the wall, it will destroy not only the bandits on the other side, but also your thermite charge on your side, which I think is dumb. There's no reason to have that in the game, so I think for that reason they should just completely take it out. Next up is Ayana. The one thing that does suck about Ayana, which is why I want to give her a little bit of a buff here, is that if you have an Ayana clone running into a room with a lot of angles and a lot of hallways and it gets shot, a lot of the times you didn't have time to react to see where you got shot from, especially if somebody has a suppressor on, which makes Ayana's ability a lot of the time seem completely underwhelming. Which is why I think that if somebody were to destroy your Ayana clone, they should at least get pinged. Whether it be a red ping or a yellow ping that just appears on your compass that tells you where the person is, I think could still be up for debate. But at least giving some information when your clone dies so that you're not just left with nothing and then an operator ability doesn't do anything would be better, to say the least. Another operator ability that I think should give a little bit more information than it already does is Ace. One thing that sucks about Ace if you're a new Ace player is you don't know exactly what your breach is going to look like in terms of where it's going to be placed. If you throw a breach charge on a wall, you don't know exactly how big the explosion is going to be, meaning you don't know if you're going to be able to crouch through it or vault through it. So showing what's going to be opened as you're throwing it, kind of like visible throw trajectory, but it shows you the actual blast radius, would be pretty cool on Ace. Next up is Zero, and I think something that's pretty underutilized in Zero's gadget is the taser on his cameras. So I think they should make it like Twitch, where you only get one taser, but after time, you're able to get a second one, just in case there's 2 pieces of utility that you need to get, but you can only get one because you're playing Zero. Speaking of information ops, next let's go over somebody who has 4 drones, which is Flores. I want to make a slight buff to Flores because there's one quality of life thing that I just don't like about this operator, which is that you only have a few seconds before your drone automatically explodes. I think giving Flores 2 more seconds before the drone explodes on each drone would make him easier to play, but also not make him too broken. Another operator that is in desperate need of a buff is Osa. One thing that really sucks about Osa is that every shield is counterable by 1 impact grenade, and you only have 2 shields. Defenders, per defender, get 2 impact grenades, meaning that if one single defender brings impact grenades and doesn't use them in the prep phase, Osa is completely countered for the rest of the game. So because of this, I think either they need to make it to where shields aren't damaged by explosives, which I think would be overpowered, or they can do what I'm going to recommend, which is give her a 3rd shield. Giving her a 3rd shield wouldn't make her too overpowered, but I also think it would make it to where even if they did bring impact grenades, you'd still have at least 1 shield left over to play around with instead of your entire ability getting completely countered. Somebody else with a lot of counters is the next operator, which is Sens. I think Sens has got a lot of quality of life changes in the past, whether it be their recoil buff to their AR or the ability to deactivate/reactivate their Sens walls. But none of this actually solved the biggest issue with Sens, which is the simple fact that a lot of times you don't know where the device is going to be deployed. So I think showing a line of where it's going to be deployed exactly before you throw would be very nice. Another operator that absolutely sucked on release but is pretty good now is the operator Grim. I like Grim a lot, and I think he's highly undervalued, especially by ranked players. But purely because of the fact that ranked players don't have the luxury of being able to set up high-level executes, which is what Grim is good for, I think one thing he could be good for is just cutting off areas in general, especially flank routes, which is why I think making Grim's bees actually proximity activated would be cool. There's really no downsides to this, because even if you were to use Grim to do execute strats by just shooting Grim bees at players, because you shot it and there was immediately an attacker within its radius, it would immediately go off. So to you, it wouldn't feel like anything about Grim has really changed, but it would allow people to set Grim bees in flank locations, which would go off and ping enemies who are flanking, which I think is awesome. Another change that I kind of think I cooked on is the change that comes to Brava. One thing I noticed with Brava is that she only has 6 hacks and 3 hacks per drone, meaning that if you get one of your drones shot, which usually does happen, you're only going to be able to hack 3 pieces of utility, and that's about how 90% of Brava matches go. So here's what I think they should do. They should make it to where Brava either has 3 drones instead of 2, or has 4 hacks per drone. I think having 4 hacks per drone makes more sense because there's still the skill expression of like, hey, I'm not getting my drone shot because I'm not an idiot, but also having 3 different drones seems a little bit overpowered for just the information that comes with the drones. So I think if I had to make a final change for Bravo, I would give her an extra hack on each drone that she has. I think if I were to give one quality of life change to Ram though, it would be to make it to where her boogies can slide off of inanimate objects instead of getting stuck on them or running into them. This would make turning her gadgets a lot easier because a lot of the times when you turn her gadget, you don't really know where it's going to end up going in the long run as the laser that it shows is only so big. Now for the final attacker in this video, let's go over Deimos. One thing that most people do as Deimos is try to play Deimos through vert or through soft surfaces in general. One thing that sucks about this though is if you're not hitting heads, the gun doesn't do as much damage through soft surfaces as it used to. So a lot of times you'll end up shooting people in the toes or in the torso, making Deimos seem pretty underwhelming. So I think what they should do is when you're pinged by a Deimos, your body doesn't get pinged, but your head gets pinged. That way shooting people through floors makes it a lot more likely that you'll get a headshot, and it makes Deimos seem a lot more powerful through floors and through soft surfaces, while still not making him completely broken. But with that out of the way, that is it for this video. Let me know if you want to see a defender version of this video. My name's Alka, check out this next video, and I hope I'll see you there.